So again, welcome to Open Hwoarang Lessons. The cheese for today is advanced Hwoarang frame traps. Of course, you're probably here after the basic and intermediate frame traps, and you want to know more. What is the next tier of Hwoarang frame traps? So we have around three advanced Hwoarang frame traps. Of course, I didn't list everything for basic and intermediate, but it's more or less, a ground so that you could learn more frame traps, because most of Hwoarang's frame traps would fall under basic and intermediate. So okay, let's go right down to it. So the very, very first frame trap is going to be the RFF F+3. As you can see here, it's plus 23, plus 17, and of course on block, this is a monster plus 12. You cannot at all interrupt Hwoarang at all at plus 12, regardless of the move he does, except Flamingo Snake Edge. You cannot. Of course, to demonstrate this, we're gonna have Hwoarang here. Of course, as you can see, LFS F+3 is a 19 frame mid from Flamingo. And again, it's plus 12, so that's 19 minus 12. That is going to be a 7 frame move. So, what is going to happen if you press a jab or a down jab versus a 7 frame move, essentially, because it's being covered by a bunch of positive frames? This is exactly what happens. Well, not exactly that, but somewhere around those lines, falling down to the floor. So that was a jab. And of course, if I do a down jab, I will still lose. So essentially, what you'd ask, Frontier, why is this cheese considered advanced? This is considered advanced because this is a high. It's a 14 to 17 frame high. It's active for around 17 frames, 3 additional frames. The issue is, how do you place this in neutral or in offense? Because it's more common to enter RFF through down 3-4 and then you do RFS 2, right? The problem is, just like in the anti-Hwoarang tips I've mentioned, after the second mix-up, so again, down 3-4 would be the first mix-up, right? And then whatever you do after this is considered the second mix-up. So if you did RFS 2, that's the second mix-up. And you can usually get out by the second mix-up. So what makes it so difficult if you're going through this flow is that if you do this, they'll down jab or they'll backdash away or step it, because it is steppable at plus 5, even if it is like a 15 to 14 frame move. So most common ways to enter RFF and do this move could be avoided, and it'll be difficult for you to even get that. And not to mention that since this is so plus, right, you'll be asking yourself, am I doing anything effective? Because let's say you do this, right? You go high, RFF F+3 into LFS 1, you're plus 5. That's another really good situation for you, but it's also a situation where the opposing Hwoarang or your opponent could, avoid the situation. They could get out. So you'll be asking yourself every time you're making use of RFF F+3 to trap your opponent and put them in a second mix-up, which they could avoid, is this any effective? Let's not forget, how do you do it? How do you do it in open? Because a lot of people would be ducking or stepping. And since most of Hwoarang mids aren't as rewarding and don't transition him to RFF at all, aside from FF3 and DF4. But in the FF3 situation, we covered this in the intermediate Hwoarang frame traps, I believe. And if not TLDR, they can backdash all the options. On block, on hit, of course, they buffed it to plus 6 force crouch, so you're free to do whatever you want, and the recommended one to do is RFF DF4, since they can't step it at all. And then if you do DF4, again, just like RFF FF3, LFF FF3, you cannot. This is all backdashable. Most of the options are backdashable. So that's what makes it troublesome. It's such a good move and such a great situation for Hwoarang. It's just a question of how do I put it and how do I place it. And once I get it, am I making it affect the match? That's the most important part. Are you making this really, really godlike move affect the match and affect the flow of the game? Because you could keep getting the situation, but you're not getting anything out of it. So one way to get something out of it is to force conditioning, right? So let's say you're always gonna repeat and do this. RFF F+3, LFS 1, every time. Regardless if it's on block or on hit, because the plus frames for on block or on hit, you just really can't interrupt. You can't interrupt anything. And then you keep doing forward 1+2. So, eventually, you start to notice your opponent ducks after RFF F+3. So they'll duck the 1, and that means what you could potentially do is do a mid. Any mid. Do any mid from LFS. Except, of course, LFS back 3. Not unless you really need the power crush, but I don't think with the frames in the situation they could press a button that would prevent you, aside from maybe a rage art. And of course, I forgot to mention this, but RFF forward 3 to LFS 1+2. This is, you cannot duck this. This jails on block. So if we have Hwoarang here, crouch, and we'll have him standing guard. And I'm gonna do the RFF forward 3 into grab. He doesn't duck at all. He does not duck. So that's another thing you could do to force them to. But of course, they could break it. It's a 1+2 break, and most players would be breaking this. Of course, here's the difference. On hit, right? RFF forward 3 to LFS 2 forward 2+3 is duckable. So that's just a small note. So if you keep going for this, like you want to make this your foolproof thing because it's jails on block, just be wary that if you do it on hit, you are going to get ducked. Again, to recap RFF forward 3, how do you put it in? And are you making sure you're maximizing it? Make sure to do an option, and then after doing said option, right? Make sure you're what do you call this? Looking at the reactions. So again, if you're doing this, RFF forward 3 to LFS 1, and they're gonna duck after RFF forward 3, make sure that's when you do the mid to check them. And then once they're standing up again after this, you could change that to LFS down 3-4, and you'll be back into another mix-up. That could be the RFS F4 mix-up, so on and so forth, regardless of the thing you decide to choose. At this point, if you're looking at the advanced Hwoarang frame traps, you're very familiar with Hwoarang's move list, and you have probably a decent amount of experience with flowing through Flamingo offense. So that is the first advanced Hwoarang frame trap in RFF. So the next one I'm going to cover is from LFF and LFS. It's mixed together. Why is it mixed together? The frame trap in question is 1 2 3 3 3 or 1 2 3 3 forward or 1 2 3 3 4. And of course, this situation could also happen of 3 forward into 3 4, 3 forward into 3 3. So of course, why is this mixed in LFF LFS category? Because you could do it from LFF. Like there's a lot of moves you could do from Flamingo to from LFF to LFS. So it's like up 3 to 3 forward, DF3 cancel into 3 forward, 1 2 3, 1 2 3, forward 3, forward. Okay, that forward 3, not FF3. And you could use it as like a small mid check. Like if you didn't want to do forward 2, which is slightly slower at 16 frames, you could do something at 14. This is the small thing. It's 14 frames. You could also do 3 3 forward into 3 forward. And of course, you could also mix that into 3 3 4. So there's a lot of options to cover here, and I'll be covering the most key portion of it. We'll start with 1 2 3. After 1 2 3, we'll move to 3 forward, and then after that, we'll move to just LFS 3 by itself. So let's start with 1 2 3. So if you do 1 2 3, it's +3 on block and +11 on hit. So of course, if it's +11 on hit, and you try to do this, I believe you cannot step it. Yeah, you cannot. Basically, on hit, this is one of the best options you could use to mid-check an opponent, aside from LFS 2. And of course, LFS back 4. Both are great options. This is also kind of hit confirmable. No, it's not. It's not hit confirmable. Hit confirmable on counter hit, not on natural hit. So if we have Hwoarang here get hit, and you try to hit confirm this, like by itself, you'll see it's -14. And both versions, I believe, are -13 and -14 respectively. So of course, most players wouldn't punish this because they're looking for the follow-up. The follow-ups, 3 4 or 3 3. So if you just do 3 by itself, you are, in quotation, safe. You're safe because they're looking out for the 2 other options, which are very common with a lot of Hwoarang players, regardless of their skill level. So the key here is, when you do 1 2 3 and you do the mid-check, right? You could choose to just do it. So you got out, did it. You're -13, you're also back into neutral. That's the kind of spacing you got. Or you do 3 forward, which will put you in the next step, right? Or you do, say, 3 4. And the common theme with this move is that it's super delayable. So even if it isn't a natural combo on natural hit, that's a mouthful, is that you can delay it. So if Hwoarang here were to delay and I were to interrupt, I'm going to lose. Because I thought he was going to press or not press. And of course, depending on your delay, what do you call this? You will get interrupted. aside from LFS 3.3 being delayable, LFS 3.4 is delayable as well. And of course, the difference is, if the only reward you get on this is F3.3, which is going to amount you to 47 damage, you're going to get way more damage if the second hit of LFS 3 is a counter hit, because that's an instant launcher. Season 1 B&B alone is 90 damage. So the issue is, just like RFF DF+4, there is no indicator, no soundtrack, just like other characters who have it, of when you did actually a counter hit. So, knowing when you did a counter hit is hearing that their sound, like the opponent's sound, the opponent made a hurt sound, or you get to see visually that they got hit. And you have to make sure that is a counter hit. So if you're delaying this, you're doing this 3 forward and then that. If you didn't get it, you're gonna get -10. And if you didn't get it, you might get ducked and they'll go punish it, or they'll block the whole sting. It's something to be really, really careful about. And of course, we're going back to 1, 2, 3. So that's what you could do. 1, 2, 3, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 3. 1, 2, 3, 3, 3, and delay it. Like, you could control a situation with that, essentially. So it's not necessarily a frame trap per se. It's more of delayed. And there's an option on top of it. There's like 2 options, mid, 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 high. And the opponent has to wait in order to challenge it. It's one of those situations where they're kind of forced to just, wait, sit there. But of course, it also isn't exactly in your favor if you press the whole thing, like 1, 2, 3. That's just -13, back to neutral. And 1, 2, 3, 3, -14. And 1, 2, 3, 4 could get ducked. And depending on their punish, they might get launched by RFS F4 on counter hit, or they'll full crouch punish you. Like if your opponent's Julia, that's going to be a bow and arrow. I'm going to move on to the next one. We were talking about LFS 3 forward before. I'm going to bring it here. So aside from just delaying these things and trying to make sure you get the visual on the counter hit, is that you could just do 3 forward instead. Now, here's the main difference about 1, 2, 3 and 1, 2, 3 and 3 forward. 3 forward does not have the frames. It does not. 1, 2, 3 has the frames. On hit, it's +11, so if you press LFS 3, you're safe. Nothing bad could possibly happen. They can't step it, they can't interrupt it. On block, they could, because on block, it's +3. And this is 14 frames. So essentially, -1, it's an 11 frame move. So the only thing they could challenge it with is a jab or a down jab. But anything else, they can't. So that's the only thing you have to worry about there. The problem about LFS 3 forward is that you have to worry about the unblock one. Because this could be common if your opponent is waiting. Waiting for to punish you. And +2 is not enough to cover for an LFS 3. In fact, it's not even enough to cover an LFS 1. So when you're in this situation, you're trapped. Because you're +2. Basically, all of Hwoarang's toolkit at this moment in Left Flamingo is interruptible. All of it is interruptible. Because you have no frames to cover for the startup frames of the moves. Because the startup frames of the moves in Left Flamingo are they're quite slow. A 13 frame jab, 14 frame mid kick, 16 frame mid, 17 frame, 16 frame low. And the list would go on, 19 frame, forward 3. And if you're only +2, so which means essentially your 13 frame flamingo jab is an 11 frame flamingo jab. So yes, you could say it's the same as 1, 2, 3 on block. But the thing is about 1, 2, 3 on block is that you could actually do 1, 2, 3, 1. And you'll trade with the jab. So that's the one thing, that's another layer that would make them think about challenging it. That's why LFS 3 could go in. And for 3 forward, you don't have that luxury. You only get that luxury when it's on hit. And that's +8. But the thing is, the more common situation would be on block compared to hit for 3 forward. 1, 2, 3, you could get this on hit because it's a punisher. It's 10 frames. At 3 forward, if this is not on hit and you're going on block most of the time, you have to keep your opponent on their toes, and essentially the same thing like 1, 2, 3. You're gonna have to let it rip sometimes if you do LFS 3 forward. And of course, we'll move on to the next one, which is what was the last part? So essentially, on hit, this is a great option to run with. And on block, it's kind of risky. But if you're able to keep your opponent on their toes by delaying the strings and recognizing when it's a counter hit, then you'll be able to get big damage and really good Oki out of it sometimes. Like really good Oki. So that covers the LFS 3 LFS 3, from 1, 2, 3, forward 3, up 3, etc. Absolutely any left flamingo transition out there, the LFS 3 series. Now that's what it is. 3 forward, 3, 3, 3, 4. That's the LFS 3 series. We'll move on to the last advanced frame trap here. This is something that's very common, and you've probably seen it before multiple times. Most especially off down 3-4 RFS DF+4. Right, well, I already said it. That's the cheese. It's +1 on block now. It has been reverted. This move used to launch on normal hit and was around -7 on block. So what's special about this axe kick, the flamingo axe kick? This also gets involved heavily with the RFS DF+4 the Hell Sweep, the Hwoarang Hell Sweep. This is a +1 move on block. And it's +8 force crouch. Wherein, mind you, check this out. Check out this interaction, which makes it fall under advanced, is that the jab will not hit. So if you wanted to get another +1, you cannot, because of the way they recover. So what you could do is do a mid. But if you're Hwoarang, you won't want to really do a mid. You'll do a mid to check, but you wouldn't really do a mid to continue offense. So if the jab does not go in, you miss the +1 situation and you go straight to down 3-4. But since they're already force crouch, they're more likely to be blocking low. So that's where the nuances of the situations come from. So if you can't get highs, and you'd have to wait for the second hit to connect, which is a little bit risky already because you'd want it to happen on the first one. And since they're already crouching, the lows probably won't go in, and you're going to be forced to be checking with mids. Of course, if it's on hit, you could easily just go for forward 1+2. It's a great situation for you. But putting yourself at -9 is a little bit of a risk as well, because they could go, if your opponent's Kazuya, he could put you in a Hell Sweep land, a Hell Sweep Vortex. So on hit, you're going to have to find a way to first check your opponent. Like, check them, make sure they're not stepping, not backdashing, nothing. Like, know what option they're going to be doing first after doing RFS DF+4. And then, like, you could use the mid check just so that, you've done the safest thing possible. So if they get hit by the mid, that kind of means they're ducking or trying to interrupt. Or if they block the mid, that would more likely mean you could guess that, okay, he's standing up. So that's the only time you could do down 3-4. And of course, by using this check mid over and over again, they may not interrupt you and try to go after it the second situation. So you could skip that and just go straight for JFSR for a better mid check, since it is 8 frames +8 force crouch. So on block for RFS DF+4 is a little bit different from on hit, because on hit you're forced to do a check thing and then counter or do your counter based on their reactions. On block, it's a little bit different because they can avoid the situation completely. So I'll just put him here to backdash. So it is +1, right? And they can just backdash away. You cannot catch them. So your plus is difficult to use. It is difficult to use the +1, and you don't want to rely on a second hit, because that could be stepped or they could punish you. Like if you're fighting Devil Jin, Heihachi, Kazuya, he could crouch dash into a God Fist and he's gonna crush. He's gonna go under the jab and he's gonna launch you really, really hard. So with this situation, if your opponent is just standing there and they're not backdashing, make full use of the +1. Like add another +1 on it, or do a DF1 just in case. So it's at 12 frames just in case you may trade with something else. Or backdash. Like this is a little bit more tricky. Just like it, well, not exactly more tricky, but it's very similar in vein to FF3 on block. So using this +1 is more on movement. So since one of the best options against this on block is to backdash, you could start showing your Mishima life. Show them the waves. And that's when they'll start thinking. But then, remember, as soon as you do that, you're open the entire time. So make sure when you crouch dash, you have a block in between, crouch dash step, whatever you want to do. Make sure you're keeping track of what they're going to do in response to you, because they could just straight up interrupt after +1, or they could choose to backdash. So it's there's too many options up in the air that make it difficult to use on block, and well, you could force reactions with it. That's one of the bonus things you could get out of the situation. Unlike RFF forward 3, where it's like you're more solid, most of the options you do are covered by frames, so you could always just change it based on how they're blocking it. Here, you're changing it based on how they want to react. Well, I mean, that sounds the same, but it's different because you're covered by frames in RFF forward 3, so you could press whatever you typically would like, and if you want to really go safe, you could always go safe. In RFS DF+4, there's not really a super safe option aside from not pressing buttons and either backdashing away to see what they do, or pressing a DF1, which could get backdashed, or DF1+2. And the only thing that wouldn't get backdash are slower moves like DF4, and you don't have the frames to cover that for you in that situation. So it's a little bit more tricky and more nuanced that you have to really, really think and observe your opponent in order to fully maximize it. And once you're able to maximize it, stuff like waving in their face, doing forward 3 after RFS DF4 or F neutral 4, you know, the possibilities are endless, including a backdash into RFF. So you're setting up into a new situation, you're trying to position yourself into something else. That kind of cheese. So of course that has been the advanced Hwoarang frame traps, around 3. There really aren't that many. Most of them really do fit under the intermediate category, not so beginner, but more intermediate. So yeah, that has been advanced Hwoarang frame traps. I've been Frontier, and that's been the cheese. You know, order's all out of whack, huh? That's what it is when you're trying to string with Hwoarang. Most especially when you try to think really, really hard on what options you could do. Just keep it simple most of the time and you'll be fine. Thanks for watching.